Welcome to Hashtag with Navguzi Chwanuka. This is a place where we help you unravel social constructs, discuss self-development in line with mental health, emotional well-being, and everything in between that directly or indirectly affects us in the millennial world around us. If you're hearing my voice for the first time and are the kind of person who is not scared of being a better version of yourself even if it requires you to contradict who you were 24 hours ago, consider this your virtual home. I'm your host, Navguzi Chwanuka, and I cannot wait to engage with you in the various conversations. This Wednesday, I bring you someone who has been very generous with her recovery story, and that is none other than Kisakye Makyeli. Rebecca is a cocktail of so many things, but most recently, she authored a book called Woman Fire Grace. In the book, she shares her recovery journey, and it's not any different. Okay, it is different because the book is bigger than the episode. In our conversation, she comes with so many gems that I cannot wait for you to hear or learn or even walk away with. I was about to say, it's been a while since I last talked to someone so brilliant. But I know that will land me in trouble. So let's just get into the episode. If anything resonates with you during our conversation, do not hesitate to share with us on social media with the hashtag #ExchangeCane Session. Let's dive into it. Welcome to Hashtag with Navguzi Chwanuka.
Thank you so much for having me.
My goodness, where do I start? Can you introduce yourself? I noticed, how do I land on your story? I was at Next Media and I was in conversations with Danzig. I have a feeling you know him.
Danzig.
Yes, I was in conversations with him and he was like, she was my seatmate in class and I had no idea she was going to do this.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
For the people that do not have any idea of who Che is, please introduce yourself.
Wow. Okay, Che is a woman of, I don't know, I'm multi-talented. Like, I do so many things, which is why I really don't like this question. Who is Che? But as of now, Che is, I'm an author, I am a speaker, and as of recently, I'm an internationally certified life coach. And I do very many things. I have experience in communications and advertising. I'm a communications consultant. I have a communications company called Nova Media. And I do a lot of things. I'm an actress. I've had radio experience. Yes, I've been in Sanyo and Prestige. And so it's I do very many things, but above all, I am a woman after God's heart. And, you know, that's really who Che is. And I know I'm still growing. God is still gracing me to do many, many more things with the opportunities that He's gracing me to.
Right.
Yes.
As someone in communication and as a writer, at what point did you start writing? Is it from this story that you have recently published, or have you always been a lover of stories from childhood?
Right from childhood. I think right before, I've always had a writer's bone in my body. Like right from when I could walk, my father started to buy me books. I was that kid who was always buried in books. I'm the last born. The brother who I follow, he's the nerd. He's always been into technology and chemistry and things like that. He's actually a telecom engineer right now. And I've always been the creative kid. I was either coloring or I was drawing or I was reading or I was writing. I started writing, I think, in my primary one. I used to write a lot of stories, and it was a very consistent thing. Like even in school, English composition for me was like water, right from primary, you understand, straight to secondary. I loved reading. I was always in the library at school. I always pressured my dad to buy me books. Like my father always knew that I was into, like, words were my friends.
Yeah.
So he taught me how to do crosswords at a very young age. I was reading adult books when I was in primary, you understand? So I've always loved writing. I've always had a thing about writing. I would write novels, like short stories in my secondary. And so along the way, when certain things started happening in my life, of course, I got robbed of my passions. I got robbed of my creativity. But, you know, whatever God has put inside of you can never be taken from you. It might lie dormant, but eventually it will come to life. So it wasn't a shock for me in 2020 when, you know, I was led to write Woman Fire Grace. You know, I said, Che, what are we good? Like in the time when I was turning my pain into power, the best way I could was through writing, because it was what would come easy for me and voila, Woman Fire Grace was born.
There you go. Yeah. You have talked about turning your pain into, is it passion? Power. Yeah. Can you talk about the part of the pain? Where is this pain coming from?
Right. I mean, I've lived a very interesting life. Actually, Woman Fire Grace is just a drop. I had to reduce the size of the book because of printing costs, but the story is quite interesting. Yeah. So those who knew me back then know the full story. But I've lived a very interesting life. Right from a young age, I grew up with a dysfunctionally alcoholic mom. And that was a very interesting experience, you know, being a kid and being forgotten at school. Everyone's being picked up and you're being forgotten at school because, you know, mom's either too drunk to come pick you up, or, you know, you don't know what version of mom you're going to get when you wake up in the morning. One day she's the happy, bright person cooking for everyone. The next day she's seated and she's glassy-eyed, looking distant. The curtains are closed. She would have hallucinations in the middle of the night. Now, it just became worse and worse towards the time of her death. She passed away in 2005. I was in Form 3 at that time. Yeah, she passed away. And growing up and seeing what alcohol did to her, I vowed in my life, I said, I will never ever taste alcohol, right? I grew up in an environment where we had parties all the time. Like, she had an excuse to have people over all the time. And we always had aunties and uncles and friends from school. For me as a kid, I was excited to see my cousins and to play and have my friends over. But of course, in hindsight now, I see that there's some things she was struggling with, and she was using alcohol as an escape mechanism. And so I vowed and I said I would never ever drink it in my life. And, you know, all it took was, this is where never say never comes in play. Because a year later, in my Form 4 vacation, all it took was just a friend of mine from school, who, a very dear friend of mine, he just convinced me and said, hey, let's go out. And, you know, I was that teenager who was all about my books, my study. I was never that person who was looking to go for parties and do this and that, because my father raised us in a way where he provided everything for us. Everything we needed was at home. I never wanted to go to neighbors' places to play or whatever, because he made home that environment. We had TV, we had cable TV growing up. We had whatever we needed. If you needed new books, he bought them for you. What do you need? You need a phone, here's a phone. And so my friend actually convinced me one night at 11 p.m. Now, my father used to work in Nairobi, so it was just me and my older brother at home. So we really had this freedom growing up, from my mid-teenage years to into my adulthood. I had that freedom around me. And I think that's actually what catalyzed the events in my life. And so a friend of mine called me at 11 p.m. Back in the day, there was that plan, Sijui MTN zone, whatever. And so we would be talking on the phone from 11 to 6 in the morning. Can you imagine what a teenager is talking about all that time? It was
There's always something that you find.
But, right, like, why? And so one day we're on phone and then it's 11 p.m. I'm watching TV. And then he tells me, hey, by the way, I have my sister or brother's car, and let me come pick you up and take you out. I'm like, me? I'm like, you heathen. Like, how can you even think of me in that way? Do you understand? Like, that's not who I am, right? But, you know, he was a cool guy. I was like, you know what? I trust him. And like, you know what? Let's go. And so he picked me up. I dressed up in my, in those days we had those jeans, those dirty stonewashed jeans, faded.
Faded, yes.
And I wore my faded bell-bottom tops. They were green and brown, and a red top. And I had my hair. At that time, I was in a school where they allowed hair, so I had my hair. And so I dressed up with my specs, and I went to one of the most popular discotheques. It was a discotheque in town.
You're talking about senior 4 vacation.
Yeah.
And
I was 15.
Exactly. That's what 15. I was going to point out, because you had talked about how you are always a year younger than your peers. So I was going to talk about that part of you being a 15-year-old and you have access to these bars.
Right. Like,
you were never asked, there were no questions from the, what are they called? Bouncers? Askaris?
Bouncers, that's the thing. We go to the entrance, the bouncers didn't even glance at me at all. Like, this guy just walked up. It's like they knew him. He was a regular. This is my classmate, meanwhile.
That's what I was going to ask as well. Was he a lot older?
He's a regular. And so we walk into the club and I look around and I'm traumatized. at that time, there were all these tabloids that we had. So you would see, I started to see real life versions of the women who used to dress on the tabloids. And I'm like, people actually step out of their houses looking like this. I felt so out of place. I get into the club and there are so many more other people my age who I know from school and from other schools.
Wow.
And I'm like, what is going on here? And they're doing all these kinds of like dancing with all these women, and they're drinking and they have beer. And I was traumatized in that moment. And I told my friend, go talk to your friends, leave me at the counter, okay? I want to be where the light is. I don't want to be in the darkness, because there were strange women and also the men. You know how men are. Like, they just see a young girl and you just automatically turn into potential prey.
Right.
You know, and I told him, leave me at the counter. So he left me at the counter with one of the waitresses who, of course, he was a regular. The waitress knew him. So she took care of me. She asked me what I wanted to drink. My first ever request for drink in my nightlife was mango juice. I asked for splash mango. And the lady laughed and she called back my friend and I think whispered in his ear and told him, this person you brought here is not in class. So he comes over and he tells me, hey, he points at all these huge... Now, by then, the beer bottles were not these sleek designs that you see. They were those fat, huge, ugly things. And so even the way the beer bottles used to look, I never used to like them because they reminded me so much of mom. And also gin and all these strong drinks, because mom used to drink gin. And so I said, I don't want any of those drinks. I said, I want something. Okay, get me something, but I don't want any of those drinks. So at that time, there was this drink, which I won't mention. They were just launching in Uganda. And their promotional strategy was branded fridges that were very fluorescent. And it stood out, like wherever that fridge was, however dark the place was, it would illuminate the whole place. And I said, I want whatever that is, because it looked like soda. It was clear. It just looked... It didn't look local. There's a way beer looked, you know. I said, whatever that is, that little bottle that's fluorescent, it looks nice. It looks appealing. It looks like something that will taste good on my tongue. And I said, just get me that. And so it was a promotional night. So there was like either 3 for something or something like that. So they got me the first 3. And this, first of all, as someone I had never taken alcohol before. So I didn't know what intoxication felt like. So I was just drinking because it was sweet. The drink was sweet. And I'm a sweet tooth. I'm like a bee. So I'm just downing the drink like I'm downing soda. And it was reggae raga night. I have a high affinity for reggae and dancehall. I'm a reggae dancehall DJ. Used to be, not anymore. But so reggae and dancehall was playing. And so as I continued to drink, I didn't know I was getting drunk. All I knew is that the music started to sound louder. You know, the song started to sound better. I said, I've listened to this song so many times, but guys, kapat I've never had. The shoulder started to move like this. Next, the knee was moving. Next thing, I was off the stool. Sis, I danced for the entire club. I danced from this corner to that corner, to this corner and that corner. Next thing I knew, I had done about 12 bottles in like 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours.
Well, for your first time.
Yeah, my first time. Because, see, I didn't know that I was getting drunk. All I knew is that the music was loud, I felt good, and the drink was sweet. This particular drink was sweet.
Yes.
It was sweet.
So, because you have talked about seeing some of the bottles that your mother used to consume.
Yeah.
Did you ever come to a point of feeling like, oh, I think mom was enjoying this. This is really good. In that moment,
yeah, but
did it
not
occur
on
to
the
you?
first night.
Or not on the first night?
Of course, that didn't come to me on the first night. I was too intoxicated to think about dead mom. Do you understand? I was just enjoying the music. You understand? But later on, as the years went on, it became a normal thing because now I understood as like, oh, so this is why adults drink, because of the feeling, and you know, there's a way that people just connect when they're around alcohol. It's strange, and so it just became a normal thing. Over time, and even some people would come to me and say, "Wow, Che, like when I would be drunk in my element with my beer, people would come to me and they'd be like, Che, you really like." Man, you remind us of mom. You understand? And for me, that was a cool thing. Yeah, because I really look like my mom.
Wow.
I'll send you a photo of my mom. It's like carbon copy. The only difference is the skin color because she was really light. She was really, really light skinned. But my face, my hair, everything is the late Annette Makyeli, everything. So people would be like, wow. Some people would say, wow, Che, like you really have your mom's spirit, like you're so outgoing like her. and things like that. Then later on, when the addiction had kicked in and I had become a nuisance, the same people now started saying, but are you surprised how much I used to drink?
You were in your hearing? Yeah. Was it in your hearing?
Yeah, no, even family members used to say it. It was actually mostly family members. So over the years...
No, hold on. Wait, no, I want to first process that. Before you move on. They were saying this in your hearing? There was no moment of counseling you or anything?
You see, that's the thing about human beings. It's easier to throw the bile than to do the right thing. You know where they say blood is thicker than water, but it flows... there's a saying, it says blood is thicker than water, but it flows faster. The people who will attack you quickest are your family members. And for some reason, they are the ones who benefit from your brokenness. I actually realized that there's very many people who benefited from me being a nuisance of the family. That I'm no longer like the celebrated last born that is, like there's people. It's just harsh reality. But it's also something that drove and catalyzed my drinking, because I used to find a sense of belonging in pleasing family, in living up to certain standards of family. So when the negative and the adverse effects of my drinking began to show in my life, things like I started dropping out of school. I failed university. At the first university they took me to. Of course, now they start talking. They're like, did you hear about so-and-so's daughter? She failed this and this, especially when you come from a family with such a high standard.
Right.
People talk. And so they took me to the second university. Still, I failed. Oh, have you heard about so-and-so? Now there, it even became worse. It's because, one, you're a girl. And, I constantly keep saying that women's sins are on their forehead. A guy can do something and get away with it. When a girl does it, it's like the attack becomes double your portion. So, of course, I started to get wind because, my father came and started telling me what's going on with you and all this drinking. And, of course, as somebody who, in retrospect, there are some things that he did, eventually he had to kick me out of his house. My father kicked me out of the house. That's how I ended up homeless on the streets. I was homeless on the streets for about 3.5 years. But he kicked me out of the house. And in retrospect, I understand where he was coming from, because this is a person who is held at a very high standard in society. He has lost his wife to alcoholism. The same thing is manifesting in his darling young daughter. He doesn't know what's happening. And so this is something that happens in our society today. People are stigmatized in families because people do not have enough information about addiction. They don't have enough information about substance use disorders, why it's manifesting in a person. People are so quick to say it's witchcraft. People are so quick to say that the person is spoiled. But there's so much more to it as a disorder. And so it started to stretch out to other family members, people saying this and people saying that. And of course, these things would come back to me in one way or another.
Right.
So I detached myself from family in order to get away from that. And so that's where the downward spiral began. From about 2014. 2014 now is where the stage of alcohol addiction had come in. I had now left the stage of alcohol use and moved to alcoholism, and then alcohol addiction then came in, and that's where the downward spiral began.
You've talked about that part of being homeless for 3 years.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard your story, there was a shift of discomfort, because for a very long time, I don't know how many times I had this conversation with, should I say, friends? I always compared America to the Ugandans here, or maybe Africa.
Yeah.
And I was talking about how, yes, we have knowledge that there are street kids or people on the streets, but it never occurs to us that there is such thing as homelessness.
Yeah.
Because when you hear most of the Americans telling their stories, they have families.
Yes.
They come from. And just like that, they're talking about how being homeless for a very long time, they have huge families. Some even have huge families. So when you talked about that, I was like, wait, what? It didn't make sense. How did we get to that point? Can you have maybe some sort of elaboration on that?
Absolutely. It's something that a lot of people feel can never happen to them. But trust me, you see, you're surprised. When I got to the streets, I found out that there are so many other people who are homeless, people I went to high school with, people I was in university with, because they were evicted from home by their families because their families couldn't contain their condition of either addiction or their habits. And so what happens is the people whom we're supposed to get love from are the ones who throw us out. And sis, let me tell you something. The streets are harsh, but the streets show so much love. And the funny thing is, when you kick someone out of home where they're supposed to get love and put them on the streets, you're putting them from the frying pan into the fire, because the streets are going to give them the substances that they want. The streets are going to tell them that there's nothing wrong with you. Your family just doesn't understand you. They're going to pet them, pet their addiction. They're going to pet their every negative aspect of it. And so you get comfortable in the streets because now you feel loved, you feel understood. And now how this actually happened is I got my first job in 2014. And of course, as an alcoholic, at the time as an alcoholic, this is now where the negative effects of the alcoholism began to manifest. I didn't think I had a problem in my teenage years or when I was in high school or when I was in university. Why? Because the negative effects hadn't started to show. So that's why you have functional alcoholics, people who say, I'll go to the bar and drink as long as I make it to work. Now, what happened is I started drinking and making it to work, but I was slacking on my work duties. I was now spending every salary, the entire salary I would get, I would drink it in like 2 days. And now I would start getting debts. Yeah. So I would now start borrowing money and staking company property. See, now that is where addiction comes in, where you see negative effects of the alcohol, but you don't care. You're like, I'll do anything to get my fix. And so eventually that put me in trouble with the company I was working in. And so I left that job. I went to the next job. Still the same thing happened. I left that company as well. And so even with all these things, remember there's pressure at home. So work had become like an escape from the pressure at home between my father and I. So now whenever I felt any kind of pressure from work, my supervisors would come to me and say, Che, what's happening with you? You're slacking on work. A client called us and said that you went for a meeting smelling like alcohol. You were smelling like a distillery. I was actually going to the bar the whole night and going to office straight from the bar. That's the kind of life I was living. I kid you not, it happens. And you think I was seated in the bar alone? No, I was with people who are also going to work from drinking. And so eventually with this pattern, this is the time my father kicked me out of the house. He said, I don't know what's going on with you, but I'm not going to be an enabler for this. So find where you're going to live. So after that happened, I packed up a few things of mine. I started living in the office where I was working. And so I was there for about a month. But of course, you can't live in office forever. The HR got wind of it and she came and told me, Che, you can't be living here. This place has CCTV. If you're not careful, the bosses are going to get to find out. So as luck would have it, a friend of mine was looking for a house and he was looking for housemates, and he reached out and said, Che, I'm looking for housemates here and here. Are you able to come through? I told him, just give me 1 more week. Salary is coming through and I'll give you the 4 months advance that you're asking for. So eventually I moved in with this person. Now, moving in with this person, yes, I had a roof over my head, but the mindset hadn't changed. And this person also was a drinker as well. And they also used to do other substances. For some reason, I tried weed. I used to do weed when I was in university. I even sold it. But I reached a point where I said, Che, choose a poison. Otherwise, you're going to die. Because I was drinking really, really heavy. And whenever I would put in marijuana, I would become a totally different person. Like I wouldn't function. So I chose my poison. It was alcohol and nicotine, cigarettes. So I stayed with those. Unfortunately, very many of my friends who I used to drink with back in the day who got into marijuana, of course, they call marijuana a gateway drug because it opens you up to looking for higher highs. So a lot of them are now in trap houses, heroin trap houses in the ghettos. Right now, they are homeless and they are addicted to heroin because they went looking for higher highs that alcohol and marijuana couldn't give them. So now they're addicted to something they can't get out of.
Yeah.
Right? I'm very thankful that I didn't let marijuana lead me into those corridors because, listen, there would be no Che today. Me, I would be dead. I kid you not. Because by the time alcohol almost killed me, like literally almost had me take my life and almost took my life in different incidents, I don't know what would have happened with heroin. So eventually I moved in with this person and it just became worse because this person was the kind of person who had access to like free drinks on a daily. Yeah.
On a daily.
So, yeah, they were DJ. Okay, let me just say that. So I was always there, like drinking, always wanting to be where they are. Even though I had work in the morning, I knew I had the responsibility of going to work, but I chose to drink till morning. So there were days when I would wake up hungover. I would wake up, look at the time, and it's midday. So I would call into work and I say, hi, I'm sorry, this and this happened. I started killing off relatives. I lost my brother's neighbor. I lost my cat. I lost this. I lost, the excuses just started piling up until one day I fell into a bout of depression. I had a nervous breakdown where it actually dawned on me. One day I woke up and it dawned on me that it had been, I don't know how many months, and my father had not checked on me. And then I started asking myself, am I this useless? And so I remember I just went into a bout of depression and all I was doing was drinking. I didn't go to work for about 2 weeks. I switched off my phone. So they got worried at work. They were like, man, this chick has company property. Nobody knows where she is. Is she alive? Is this and this and that? So in this time, I had no money. I had locked myself in my room. I wasn't eating. I was just drinking the crude sachets and smoking. That's all I was doing. And so I was so depressed. And all I could do was just listen to music and cry myself to sleep or just drink and smoke. That was all I could do. So after 2 weeks, a friend of mine reached out. A workmate had gotten in touch with them and they reached out. And eventually they told me, hey, the boss is looking for you. The boss wants to talk to you. So I went in to see the boss. The boss actually told me, Che, whatever is going on, you can seek help. Your job is here for you whenever you need to. If you need to take all the time off, take all the time off you need. But, just leave the company property here. Go sort out what you need to sort out. And I left the company property there. I fired myself from that job. I never went back. That's what I would do. Every job I would get, even the first job, I literally fired myself. Even this one, I fired myself. So then it was like a pattern. I would wake up and not want to go to work. And I just leave just like that.
Oh, yeah? So it's not something that was like, how about I fire myself before I get fired?
No. Like there are days I would wake up and I'm like, you know what? Like what am I? I would get into certain depressive and maniacal states where I just give up on life. That's a point of hopelessness where you sit and you evaluate your life and you're like, Che, like really, like what's going on? Family hates you, friends are running from you, like you're doing nothing in your life. And you hate yourself, you hate everyone around you, and so I fired myself from that job. Now, of course, with no job, I can't pay rent, right? I'm living in a house with this person, so I couldn't tell them that I had no job, right? They just started seeing I wasn't going to work and they're asking, man, what's going on with you? And I'm like, don't worry, I'll sort it out. Oh, you're looking for rent? Don't worry, I'll get you rent. So 4 months went by and I hadn't paid rent. And the relationship between us had become so strained. And so we weren't speaking to each other. Eventually, with 4 months, the landlord had also become so agitated. So eventually, my housemate comes to me and tells me, Che, you know what? This thing isn't working. Don't even worry about paying the rent. Just pack up your stuff and leave. And so remember when I was at my dad's house, I had a workplace to hide in. Here, I had nowhere to hide. So I just packed up a few things. And from June 2016 to February 2020, I was a homeless urchin on the streets of Kampala. It's a long time, I know. The streets are loving. When you get on the streets, you never want to leave. Trust me. As deplorable as the state of living is, it's just, you just get sucked into the decadence and into the nightlife. And eventually I just entered addiction in that time because all I could do to survive was be in places where there was alcohol because that's all that I knew. I would be in bars, and with Kampala, I got to find out in Kampala that there are bars that open at 5 in the morning and close at midnight. So when you're at a bar that closes at 5 in the morning, you move to this other bar that opens at... So I had a place to be every time.
Wow.
I had somewhere to be.
How were you feeding in these years? Because I'm looking at you jobless.
Yeah.
Yes, you're on the streets. I don't know.
Food was no longer a basic need in my life. Alcohol had now become top priority.
And how are you accessing it if you didn't have money?
That's a good question. The advantage I had is I'm a lady, right? So you know how, I don't know if you've drunk in Kampala bars before, but when you sit in bars, people have this thing of, I can't drink alone, right? So they buy for people who are around. And even as a lady, I had a skill. I was a DJ. So there's something about being a lady and you're a DJ and you're playing good music and drunk men get wind of you. So they see and they're like, wow, the DJ is even a lady. So cool. So they would tip me. The bars would never pay me. One of the bars actually offered me accommodation accommodation. I would sleep in the couch that was in the dark area of the room. I went to the owner and I told him, hey, I'm in a sad situation in life, but I'm a DJ. I can play music. Is there an arrangement that we can have? And he said, yeah, so you play the music, you can sleep. It had a small shower in the back, so I was living there for some time. But of course, it was a bar. You know, when you're a DJ and you're someone who loves drinking, I constantly had drinks. I would get tipped. Of course, when people are leaving the bar, they don't want to leave you behind. You know, when that bar is closing, because it was one of these small little bars, not a major bar. It was like a little neighborhood watering hole. So that was like where I could drink from. So you play till like midnight, 1, 2. Then after that, people want to go finish the night off at a bigger bar. So when the bar is closing, they don't want to leave you behind. They're like, DJ, come with us. And of course, Che, like, I'm going to get drinks. You can't say no. Do you understand? So by the time you go with them, you drink till the next day. So I got lost in this spiral. It was just a dangerous spiral. I lost touch of reality. I didn't know what day of the week it was. I didn't know. Sometimes I would stay in the bar and like people would even leave me in the bar. And then next thing I know, I'm just walking on the road and I find like a shopping mall. And then I climb the balcony. It's like, that's where I would sleep. I would tell the Askari, I'm drunk, just help me. And the Askari would say, okay, just give me a cigarette. I always had cigarettes with me. I give him a cigarette and I lay down either a scarf or a shawl. My handbag is my pillow and I would sleep there.
We have rushed so fast to the adulthood side of your life.
Yeah.
And I've come to think to myself, because in your book, you talked about, or even here, you talked about your mother forgetting to pick you up at school. And in the book, you also talked about that part where was it Tanzania that you were going to, when mom and I think an uncle of yours had to drop you at the airport, and you didn't want to.
I was going to Zambia. Yes.
Zambia. You were tired and you didn't want to look back at this kind of life. So I'm looking at a child who is struggling to, I don't know, should I say find love from their primary carers, and they're just tired of this kind of life. And then there is also you, a year later after your mother passing on, you are starting to drink. Did you ever have there are two questions here. Did you have a conversation with your peers in school? Because when you're in school, you talk about my mom this, my dad this, my mom this.
Yeah.
Did you have a friend that you could confide in, or even a teacher? Because sometimes we had favorite teachers in schools. And then the second question that came to me was, did you have a moment to grieve and make sense of what had befallen you?
Okay, I'll answer the first question. I did have friends, but my friends were drinkers as well. Yeah.
But were drinkers before your mother passed on?
Oh, before my mom passed, like after my mom passed on, I had friends, but at that time, just after she passed on, I was not drinking. So, and also, I don't think people had that emotional maturity to understand. We were teenagers. We did not have the emotional maturity to understand that, you know, this person just lost their mother. They may be going through something. For them, as a teenager, you know that if someone lost a parent, they went home for some time. Or you knew they went home for leave. That leave is for you, for them to grieve and to be home. And so when they come back, it's no one's responsibility to ask, how are you doing? How are you feeling? People just tell you, welcome back.
Right.
And life moves on. We were kids. We were teenagers. We did not have that emotional maturity. When I started drinking, I started keeping drinkers around me. Even when I went to another school, the people who became my friends are the ones who I would find in the bars the other side. Because they wouldn't judge you for who you were and what you did. I didn't want to be around people who are asking me, but why are you going out? Why do you hang with such people?
Right.
You understand? You're a teenager. Your hormones are raging. You have opinions. You have an attitude. You want to be the cool kid, and the cool kids were the ones who drank. You know, well, at least that's what we were sold. That was the kind of life I went in. Of course, no one was counseling me. And at that time, between the age of 16 to 20, when I was coming to the end of university, there was like, my family members didn't know that I drank to that level. Actually, I didn't know that I drank. Even my dad got to know that I drank when I was in university. But by then it was too late, way too late. So there was no counsel at the time because nobody knew. There was no knowledge of an issue to be addressed. So the only people I hung around with were drinkers, and they were enablers. When I went out to drink, no one was going to ask me and tell me, but yeah, why are you ordering drinks? No, because we're all ordering drinks. You get what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Was there a moment you had with a friend, like maybe like from primary school, because these are things that you were seeing from childhood?
Yeah.
That's where I'm asking the teacher themselves if you had any that you could speak to.
Yeah.
You know why I'm really asking this? Were you struggling with this knowledge all by yourself? You wake up and you're not sure, is today a good day for mom? Am I supposed to tiptoe?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to be lovey-dovey around her?
Right. Of course. Now, of course, all this happened so many years ago, decades ago. But now I understand what happened, because even when I was writing Woman Fire Grace, it was a healing process for me, because there were so many things that happened to me in childhood that I was trying to drink away.
Right.
I didn't even realize it. Even my mom's death is one of them. I didn't grieve my mom all those years. I actually grieved her on a certain day in 2020. That was when I was coming into my journey of sobriety, because that was a time, the pandemic is the time where I had my moment of reflection, because I now had no access to bars, no access to alcohol. So now my mind was thinking clearly. And one thing I always say is, once a mind is accustomed to chaos, it can't comprehend clarity. Mm-hmm. And so when that clarity came, I now started to think back on everything that had happened in the last 15 years. I started to think about mom's death. I recently, at that time, I had just lost my eldest brother. He died of alcohol-related complications in the UK as well. Yes. So I had begun to think about my life, how I am approaching my 30s and I have no degree. My friends have good jobs. People are getting married and starting families. For me, I'm just a public nuisance. Yeah, everyone has given up on me. Family has given up on me. Friends have given up on me. I had now started to give up on myself. So that was a time of reflection where I began to heal from certain things that I was essentially escaping from.
Right.
The truth is, I grew up in an environment where I practically raised myself, literally. Because after mom's death, I've never had a conversation about the birds and bees with my parents or even siblings. I literally raised myself. The things I knew about life, I learned from the streets. I learned how to protect myself from the streets. I learned a version of love from the streets, which of course is a skewed version of what love is. Mm-hmm. And so I was constantly entering toxic relationships because I had a skewed version of what love is.
Right.
And so this is something I keep saying. We need to make homes again, because children are great imitators. We need to give them something great to imitate. As adults, what we live out as adults, we are actually products of our experiences. Mm-hmm. We are products of the environments we've grown up in. We are products of the people that we have grown up around. And there's something called complex trauma. Complex trauma is something that manifests in adults as a result of being subjected to either severe experiences or adverse things when they're children. It doesn't manifest when they're children, but it manifests when they are adults. Because now their subconscious has been shaped a certain way by what they've seen, what they've experienced, what they've heard. So they act out in a way. The subconscious is actually, it's like a gatekeeper. It keeps you in the familiar. So when something triggers you, when something happens to you and maybe you're in a situation where you're like afraid or you're threatened, you will run back to the familiar. So if a child has grown up being abused by their parents, or grown up with an abusive parent, or if they've grown up seeing violence in the home, that person will have no problem staying in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
That person, if somebody has grown up with alcoholic parents or has grown up around adverse effects of alcohol, when they see adverse effects of alcohol manifest in their lives, they will see no problem with it. That's complex trauma. So it manifests in us because the subconscious mind is keeping us in familiar chaos, because that's all it knows. Mm-hmm. So that's actually what had begun to happen to me. I just thought I was just living out life. Like, I found it so easy to run to alcohol to deal with things in a way that other people didn't understand. And so that's how friends had started to just move away from me, because they saw my drinking was way out of control. Like, yes, there's a point where we are like, you know how Ugandans, how we celebrate party after party and this and that.
Right.
But there's a point where even you reach and you're like, but this person, like something is up, So instead of reaching out, human beings naturally know how to see trouble and keep themselves away from it. So when human beings see trouble, their first sign is to just back up and go away. And so I really don't blame a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends really just decided whatever is happening there, I don't want to be a part of it.
I mean, they don't even know how to deal with it.
They don't even know where to start, you know.
You don't have this knowledge.
And first of all, I was that person who, whenever we go to the bar, I don't care if it is my last money or it is my salary. I will spend all of it for all of us to drink.
Whoa.
So you know how they say you don't speak anyhow to the mugaga of the table. So
respect the rich person.
So even like the people I would drink with were like, Manche is going to give us drinks. Let me not say anything. You get, that's really what it was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because now you've talked about seeing your mother glass-eyed when you're a child, and one minute she's happy, the next minute she's looking out of the window looking lost. What could have happened in your young mind? Do you have a recollection of that? Did you feel like, I think there is something troubling her, and probably when you came to that stage of dependency on alcohol, did it ever occur to you that, oh my God, I think this is the coping mechanism I might have picked on from mom?
I found all that out in 2020. All that. In the entire 15 years that I was drinking, and when I had come under the yoke of alcohol, I was just addicted to the feeling. It's just the feeling that alcohol gives you. You see, it had become a coping mechanism. When I was introduced to alcohol, that first night I went out to drink, the feeling was good. The feeling was good. And so I became accustomed to the feeling. Whatever that feeling was, I just wanted to constantly feel it. However, along the way, I started to use that feeling to escape from certain things. Two of the most common causes of alcohol addiction, studies have shown. The first one is peer pressure, being exposed to the substance, be it alcohol or whatever. That's peer pressure. The second, which is the most common, is coping with stress. And so addictions are actually products, or addictions are actually results of using dysfunctional coping mechanisms. That's just what addictions are. You just get addicted to using something to do away with stress. Whenever you feel a stressful situation come your way, you run back to this thing, because it's something I call familiar chaos.
Right.
It's the one thing that you're used to that will calm you down, because you know when the mind is triggered, when the mind senses stress, or when the mind senses a threat, there's a pleasure chemical called dopamine. So whenever a stressful situation arises, your body is triggered to look for whatever it is that releases dopamine in you. For people, it's different. Yeah, for different people, it's different. For some people, it's sex. For some people, it's alcohol. For some people, it's different kinds of drugs. For some people, it's adrenaline, like just being an adrenaline junkie. Someone is just at work at midday and just shouts, "Let's go zip lining," and you're like, "Okay, fam, what's going on?" Yeah, but you see, that's what it is. The body is looking for the reward chemical because the mind is sensing stress. And it wants to be lifted back to that place. And the only chemical that does that is dopamine. Unfortunately, substances like alcohol, marijuana, things like drugs, heroin, meth, these produce dopamine at a very dangerous level. That every time someone ingests that substance and the dopamine is released, it's released so rapidly. So whenever the mind goes back to normal state, it wants that dopamine again. So the person has to keep running, looking for the alcohol. So that's how people move from alcohol use to alcohol dependency, which is alcoholism, eventually to alcohol addiction.
You give credit to God a lot.
Always. Not a lot. Always.
I'm just seeing you for the first time, and I landed on your story, I don't know how long back, maybe 2 weeks ago. And in your story, you talked about grace finding you. When I opened the book, I was seeing scriptures. And for me, who is always caught offside with the scriptures, I'm laughing. I'm seeing these quotations. Can you speak on that part? When you say always, now that you've clarified that you have always given him credit.
Yes.
Is it something that you've had from childhood?
No, actually, no. I grew up in a religious family. By religious, I mean church on Sunday, do whatever else you want on Monday. We would sit in the front row seat of our church on Sunday, but during the week it's party after party after party after party. It was religion. It's like you think that 1 hour of the week is going to make you right with God, and then you can do whatever else you want. There was never that personal relationship with God, really. And so at the time when the pandemic hit, this is actually the turning point of my life. This was 2020, February 2020. Some money was released to my family, and my brother, it was given to my brother because nobody knew where I was. So my brother made it a point to look for me. And so he found me, he located me, and he said, hey, this money has been released to the family. Your portion is in the bank account. If you want the money, come and get it from my office. The first order of the day, he got a broker. He released money and said, get a place to stay. I found a place to stay. I was off the streets, but still I was drinking. So I spent a lot of that money that I got on drinking. Yeah, but as long as I had a roof over my head, I was good. And unfortunately, after February, this time I had settled down. I had now bought a phone because I had no phone. Every phone that my brother would get me, I would sell it. What's the point of having a phone with no one to call you? You have no food. So he bought me a phone. He said, man, get yourself together, start applying for jobs, get back into the market again. I said, okay. I worked on myself. I got my resume together. I was getting gigs as a DJ. Now I could brand myself as a DJ well. I was coming up as a DJ. My DJ name was Mad Michelle. That was when reggae and dancehall nights were coming up. I was a reggae dancehall DJ. So it was doing really good. And then a month later, just as I was getting into, callbacks to job interviews and all that, the pandemic hit. So there was nowhere to go. I was stuck in this four-walled place, no alcohol, no access to alcohol, no money. And that is when I underwent my own rehabilitation process. I keep telling people rehab is not a place, it's a process.
Right.
Rehabilitation is basically restoring something to its default settings. And so that is the place where I underwent my own rehab with God because there was no alcohol for me to fall back on. So now my mind was clear. I was sober. So everything came back to me, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Now the bad was stressing me out seriously, but I had no coping mechanism.
Healthy.
And so that is...
You had no healthy.
Exactly. Healthy coping mechanism. And so I started having nervous breakdowns. I was just crying because now my life was before me. I started to think about mom. I started to think about my brother who had died. I started to think about how far behind I am in life. My family hates me. My friends hate me. I now started to think about things that I had forgotten, the abortions that I had, the relationships that I had, the friends that I had hurt. Like my life was just a mess. And so I was now in the battlefield of the mind. And what was happening is I was being conditioned to deal with these things without having to run to something destructive.
Yeah.
And the fact is, whether you like it or not, something will always have mastery over you. Something will always have mastery over you. And in that place where I was, when somebody talks about suicide, I know what that feels like because I know what it feels like to reach a place where you have no hope. Like you have nothing to look forward to tomorrow. Like you've given up on life. I know what that feels like. And so at this time, a friend of mine reached out to me and, had just, because that was the pandemic, people were reaching out to people, how are you doing? How is this and that? And so she reached out to me. I used to drink with her back in the day. She used to own a bar, but now she's born again. She works at a Christian radio station. And so she reached out to me and she said, actually, a long time, how are you doing? And so she would share with me scriptures, people who send broadcast messages and all that.
Right.
But in my mind, I'm like, why is this one stressing me? Do you understand? With her scriptures, I want alcohol, right? But in that time, I was still going through the battle of the mind. I was crying myself to sleep. I was sleepwalking. I was having lucid dreams. My body and my mind it was a tug of war. It was a battlefield. And I reached a place where I hated myself so much. I hated my life so much. I was actually at the point of, if I exit this life thing at this point, there's no problem. I was like, this life thing, I've really done it. I've tried. I'm done. But my friend invited me for online fellowship. And she told me, no, just come and attend. If you don't like it, just, let it go. And I started attending. Truth be told, I started attending. She sent me a link for the morning prayer, the radio station she worked at, because I had started to pray, but I didn't know what praying was. I thought praying was the grace for this meal. We thank you, O Lord. Amen. But now it was actually understanding that prayer is communing with God, fellowshipping with God. And so I was advised that whenever you get into that place where these thoughts come, you feel like you're losing your grip, just go into prayer. Whatever it is that is in your mind, offload it to God in prayer. And so I started to look forward to that. And, I would wake up, whatever it is that I was thinking, before I start to cry, I just open my eye, I just close my eyes and I just start telling God, this and this has happened, this and this has happened, this and this has happened. But at the same time, I was introduced to reading the word. The Bible is actually it tells us what God's will is for our lives. When you find people who have suffered things like addiction, because alcohol and all these substances are not the problem. They're just symptoms of the problem. There's a deeper psychological issue, which is why this is now what rehabilitation and psychosocial support get into. But it's now coming into a place where you understand that there is a spiritual aspect to life. As human beings, we love to acknowledge things. We talk about the soul. We talk about the body, but we ignore the spirit, which is actually the core. If you try to fix your soul and try to fix your body without dealing with the spirit, you're wasting time, because your life flows from the spirit outward to your soul. Your soul is your mind, your will, your emotions. So the spiritual foundation that you have is going to affect your will, your emotions, the decisions that you make, and those decisions that you make are going to be executed by your body. And so it was coming into a place where I had to have a relation. I had to cultivate a personal relationship with God, not a religious one, where, first of all, it was the pandemic. Churches were closed. Yeah. Churches were closed. So people who are looking for their righteousness in 1 hour on Sunday, that wasn't going to work. So it was develop a personal relationship with God on a daily. Commune with him in prayer. Read his will. That when you don't feel loved, when you feel like everyone has given up on you, know that God still loves you. And his love is eternal. God is not going to wake up one day and say, today you know what, you've overdone it. No, I'm not going to love you today. No. That is the constant supply of love. It's a connection that a lot of people are looking for. And when people have that disconnect in life, they now look to these terrible coping mechanisms. It's just a lack of connection. It's just a disconnect. And so when you come into the right connection, then you will have your solid foundation. Yeah. And that is where you can execute and start to walk a right path in life. And for me, it was getting into that place that brought me that understanding. And listen, my life, for 15 years, I had been looking for love. I had been looking for identity, for purpose, for value, for worth in so many things that were temporal. But when I came into the understanding of who God is and what his will is for my life, my entire life changed. I didn't find any value in what anyone said about me. I didn't find any value in any substances or any feelings that anyone had in me. And that is where I began now to even build, to find purpose. I had lost purpose in life. Maybe I was useless. For me, it was just the sun rises, the sun sets. If we are still alive, when the sun comes up, well and good. We move. There was absolutely no purpose. And so it was from that place that I got to understand that the things that I had lost touch with, like my passions, like writing and things like these, writing is a gift that God gave, and addiction had robbed me of that. Yeah. And so in that place of healing, when I was inspired to write the book, Woman, Fire, Grace, I started to write that book. It started out as a healing project for me, but look at how God used the gift that he gave me. The book, it started as a healing project for me, but I assure you, so many people have benefited from this book more than I have. To speak about my story in Nigeria, I've received invitations here in Kenya. I've received from people in the US, people in Germany, in the Netherlands. Because, listen, the truth is, in this world, we have been sold options. Things like addiction, like, you're addicted, we'll just pop you in a rehab center and you come out 3 months later and you're good. No, rehab centers are good. These are places that catalyze the rehabilitation process. But there's a difference between getting free and staying free. Yeah. Getting free is when the substance is no longer there in your life, but how do you get to a point where you have the mindset that is going to make you make better decisions on a daily? That when stressful situations come, you won't run to familiar chaos. How do you stay free? There are people who go to rehab, and I've been invited to rehab centers to speak. There are people who have been to rehab and they stay good for 2 years, then they're brought back, then they stay good. There's someone who was in a rehab center. He had been sober for over 20 years. Over 20 years. He hadn't touched a drink. And then something happened in his life and he just relapsed.
20 years.
20 years. He hadn't touched a drink. 20 years. But something happened in his life and he just relapsed. That's why I keep saying the evidence of someone being free is not that I don't drink anymore. No, it's that hardships come or stressful situations come, but you don't have to run back to that as a coping mechanism.
That's right.
And so it was that connection, that relationship with Jesus that actually let me know that his love never fails, that even as much as hardships come, I know that he's there for me, that this too shall pass. I had hope restored again. Hope is knowing that something won't last forever. That's what hope is. Hope is knowing that better is coming. That even when I've lost my job, even when people don't talk to me anymore, it's okay. It's fine. Better is coming.
Right.
Yeah. So it's restoration of hope. That is every addict's greatest weapon. If you're in recovery, hope. Because that's what has been lost. If you're able to get your hope back, you're able to get back in life.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I found it very important to have your story here because from childhood, this is something I'm sure you also, maybe for your part, you might have had a different narrative about life generally. But oftentimes in society, when we are talking about drunkards and on the village, it is mostly men that we are saying.
Yes.
If we are talking about addiction in family, it is a story of, how is he now? Where did he go?
Yes.
There is barely a sheep.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're just dismissive of that.
No, the funny thing is, no, you're actually right. Over the past years, it's been, and it still is, that males are actually the ones who are affected or who suffer from addiction the most. But the number of females is actually on the rise. It's because, first of all, we cannot dismiss the fact that we live in a society that celebrates alcoholism. On radio, every show has an alcohol ad. On TV, billboards. All this alcohol is celebrated. It's such a normal thing in our society today. When did we come to the point that at now Sunday we have brunch? Drinking used to be a thing that you do Friday and even Saturday it became a stretch. It was Friday after work. You go and you be hungover the whole weekend and you prepare for the week. Then we evolved to Monday, we have happy hour.
Oh.
Tuesday, there is happy hour. Wednesday, there is happy hour. Thursday, happy hour. Then Friday is the drinking day. Saturday is now a day for lifestyle, where there's barbecues, there's sports games. But all these are all now excuses to consume alcohol.
Yeah.
Sunday now is brunch, CJ brunch. Like, we are looking for ways. Alcoholism has been woven in our social fabric so much. Let's not even talk about how easily available and accessible it is. When I was in primary, my mom used to drink 2 mizinga of UG a day. And it was me who would go to the shop and buy them. I would go to the shop and buy them. 2 in a day. Trust me, when I grew up now, I started drinking more than that in a day.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I was smoking about a pack and a half in a day, and I would drink like 6 quarters and a bottle of muzinga. What are you talking about? You see, this is what I'm talking about.
How are you?
Alcoholism has become so celebrated. We don't even know what is excess anymore.
That's a lot. How? Because
it's a lot. But it's normal now. Let me tell you, go to a bar now and you'll find a table that has 3 people, but the table is littered with clusters of beer bottles for only 3 people. We don't even know what is excess anymore because that's what's cool now. It's celebrated. You go on Instagram and Snapchat, the tables are dirty. People are now putting out receipts. We spent 10 million in a night, and guys are like, that's what's cool. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
But the same people who are enabling you, wait for the point when it's time for a car wash, when it's time for a kidney transplant in India. In 10 years, I'm telling you, we are laughing at it now. We laughed at it 10 years ago. Now, the people who we used to drink with have heroin issues. Butabika, they've tried to take them to Butabika. Butabika can't contain them. They're now in the streets on trap houses. 10 years from now, all this celebration of alcoholism we are seeing, we are going to hold car washes. And I'm telling you, we are going to bury our people. Because the cost of healthcare in Africa, if you're someone who has a lifestyle condition, you're on the path to death. I kid you not. This is something we need to address now. And that's why my book is called Woman Fire Grace, because it's just by the grace of God I came out of this thing. I went for a full body checkup and the doctor told me, please help me. when you leave this place, do not drink or smoke again. The doctor himself told me this is like God giving you a second chance. Like no one should have this amount of alcohol in their blood.
Because that's what I wanted to ask you. It's a good thing that you've talked about going for a checkup. What is the meaning of occasional drinker? I do drink, once in a while. I don't want to misuse words. Once in a while. But it's always a thing of being alert. Can I think straight? Okay, this is in my system. I don't know if it's just me overthink. I overthink my life or even my decisions. So I always think about these, if the liver is, has to flush out these things and, you read about how long it takes. I think so much about that. So when you say, there's a time when my cousin trashed me that I'm a disappointment to brands. It's not even only my cousin. There was someone else because I had a Mzinga of UG and I can have that for a full year.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about 2 in a day and I'm like, oh my God.
What are you talking about? There are people who Muzinga you see, there's someone who made a joke and said white people can't drink with Africans because white people, you see, that's how white people drink. They get like a bottle of whiskey and keep it in their office or in their home and then they sip like for a whole year. You can't tell that to an African. Or if I have my salary, you're telling me I'm buying a bottle and I'm going to sip it. No, for them they shots. It's a weird, I don't even understand what it is about that. But I think maybe you're just oblivious of what is happening. I don't know how often you drink. Maybe you're just oblivious.
Like I said, I'm not really an outdoor person.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I think that's why. Because I'm here to tell you that there is a very serious alcoholism problem in Uganda. It's a very serious problem. It's terrible. It's coming to a point where I don't know where it is at now, but from what I'm seeing on social media, because I still follow a few of my friends who I used to drink with, all these places that operate like Transnight and Transday are increasing, which means people are having more time to drink. There are places where people go and sit for 3 days without going home and the doors don't close and they're just drinking. You see, our ancestors used to drink occasionally. They drink on funerals. They would drink on, the birth of a baby. Even in the 60s, in the 70s, alcohol was something that you drank on Friday night. You drank it on your child's graduation. People say that how come our parents used to drink and they're okay? They never used to drink like we do. The alcohol is not as cheap and accessible and available as it is now. We are headed to destruction. And let me tell you, the way that it is affecting the youth now, it's terrible. Because all these alcohol brands have now changed their brand manuals now are targeting universities. As soon as someone comes out of high school kids are now even not just doing alcohol. High school kids are now even doing heroin. I've seen it. My friends tell me the kids from Mengo Secondary School go to Bakuli there to buy clusters of heroin. 13, 14-year-olds.
Heroin?
Yeah,
what is heroin like? Is it liquid form? Is it powder?
It's powdered form. So people take it in 2 forms. So you can there are people who inject, there are those who inject it. Yeah, there are those who inject it.
I see these things in movies. I'm very out of touch with society.
Trust me, it's a very serious problem in Kampala now. I've buried my friends from heroin. Yeah. People are dying. It's a serious thing. There's a trap house in Bakuli. There's one in Chisenyi. There's another one. It has now extended. There's another one in Namugongo. There's one, I'm not sure where they told me the latest is, but people are dying. The sad, I don't even want to go into details with this thing because it's a bureaucratic thing. The same people who are supplying this heroin are the same people who are running the mental hospitals here. I don't even want to speak about it here because I don't want to bring any trouble to your platform. This is actual research that we have done and we have found out, which is why the battle on hard drugs is very hard in Uganda.
Because they have to make money out of that.
Exactly, because even when somebody is addicted to heroin, they put you on a program called MAT in Butabika, Medically Assisted Treatment. So what happens is they put you on this program, and what they do is they put you on a drug, an opioid called methadone. It's an opioid. So basically, they get you off heroin by putting you on an opioid. But they get you off bondage by putting you in more bondage. Because this one has less adverse effects. Opioids are it's such a crazy chain. that opioid is moved by the gun. Like, it's so expensive. You don't just go and they give it to you. We've tried to ask and to say that, can you be able to provide this to them? Because the people who are affected are people who can't even afford food. They are doing crimes at night because these are people who want to get free, but they can't even afford transport to transport them from Bakuli to Butarika every day, because you have to go to the hospital every day to see your counselor and get the drug. But this person can't afford food. How are they going to afford transport? Yet this is a person who wants to be free. So this is a person who's going to rob people at night, a person who's going to steal. These are people who are constantly being put in prison cells every day, and then they have to be taken out. You know, it stresses them so much. They're like, why should I even get on this program? Let me just continue using the drugs. Do you understand? It's such a vicious cycle. I can't even go into detail in it. It's painful what's happening on ground. It's so painful. Alcoholism, that one, it's a vice. We just need stricter regulation around it. That's it. Because the regulation has just become loose. You can't have people. How are you able to walk into a bar at 9 a.m. and access alcohol? Like, what is that? We have high school kids are drinking. They go to Sidri, watch rugby club to watch a rugby match, and they're drinking alcohol in the name of watching sports. There are no IDs that are being asked for at establishments.
I used to hear about the ID beat back then, before, I don't know.
Nothing. I entered discotheques without IDs. Nothing. Let no one lie to you. That thing has never been. The thing about our government is that there's so much talk, but there's no implementation. Why? Because they are the ones who are benefiting from the establishments.
Right.
So it's a bureaucracy issue. It's a humanity issue. It's greed. Our people are dying at the expense of other people's greed. That's it. That's all I can say. Yeah. Yeah, trust me. So you see, this is why I say we need Jesus, because we just need Jesus. That's it. The deeper you go into this thing, and the deeper when I came to Kenya, it's even worse. There are girls in high school here who dip their tampons in vodka and stick them up their whatevers.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, it's a thing here. That's how they get drunk. Tampons. So when you hear people like us very vocal about alcoholism, it's because there are just newer ways of alcoholism and this evil being propagated among the youth. There are newer ways. Alcoholism is not what you used to see at our parents drink. They dance when they are drunk with their 1, 2, 3 bottles that they've drunk. No, people are getting drunk on copious amounts of alcohol. Happy hour alone from 5 to 7, someone has taken 3 rounds. Those are, let me see, 3 times 3. 9 in 3 hours alone. That's now 7 p.m. This person is going to leave the bar at 6 a.m. I want you to tell me what they're going to take between 7 to 6. And that's just one day of the week. There are people are drinking every day because the economy is getting harder. Things are getting harder. People are looking for legal coping mechanisms. People are struggling. Mental health issues. Listen, people are dealing with their issues in the most unhealthy ways ever.
Yeah.
But the unhealthy way is being celebrated left, right, and center.
It's a lot of information and so many things that I'm learning from you. And I intend to keep coming to you to learn about some things, to raise more awareness. Yeah. And I don't know how, this is a lot of work.
Trust me, it's a lot. It's a burden. For me, it's a burden that I've been given to raise awareness around addiction, because this is something that it perturbs me how celebrated it is. And I know what it means to start out drinking, thinking it's something harmless. You know, people tell you it's cool when you drink. But the time when its effects start to manifest in your life, the same people will be nowhere to be found.
Right.
It's such a sad situation. I know the evil of what this thing can do. I've seen what it has done to my family. I have experienced it firsthand. And there's a time I was interviewed somewhere, and the interviewer asked me a question and said, Che, at the age of 15, if somebody had come and talked to you and told you to stop drinking, what would you have done? And can I tell you, I had no answer for her because nobody came to talk to me. I can never know what would have happened because nobody came to talk to me. People started talking to me when I was 25, 10 years later. When now I was treating STIs, I was homeless, I had been chased from jobs, I had been blacklisted by friends and family. Now people are telling me alcohol is bad. Who knows, maybe my 15 years would not have been wasted. And that's why whenever someone asks me, whenever people tell me, Che, come and share your story, especially when it has to do with teenagers and young adults, I don't hesitate. I go. Who knows whose life I'm saving?
Right.
You know?
Right.
We need more people. As there are more evangelists of alcohol is cool, drink this, drink that. You know, alcohol makes you cool, makes you this. We need more evangelists of people who tell you the actual effects of alcohol long term, not just for one night. How it's going to make you the guy that every chick wants and how it's going to make you the chick every guy wants to hang out with. No, I want to tell you what happens if you let this thing have mastery over you.
I can't say 10 years later. How many years is this now? 15 years later?
15 was 2020.
2020.
Yeah,
so that's like 17 coming to 18 years.
Yeah.
How is your relationship with yourself? Have you forgiven yourself?
I had to. I mean, that's the first step. You know, I constantly tell people that when you're on the journey for healing, the first step is acknowledgement. Acknowledge there is a problem. And within that acknowledgement is forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive people who hurt you. And then you have to seek forgiveness from the people you hurt because you don't get to determine the way your actions affected people. And so forgiveness is key. I had to forgive myself. That moment of clarity when everything is coming to you and you have no alcohol to fall back on, you will cry tears. You have to forgive yourself. Right. Yeah, I had to. I did. I forgave myself. I did. Yeah, I knew that I'm forgiven. God forgave me. And I had to get off. Like condemnation is something I had to let go of because condemnation is holding on to things God has let go of. And that's why I'm very serious about developing a personal relationship with God because if you don't know that you are forgiven, you will constantly live in condemnation.
Right.
Constantly.
And we've come to the end of this episode. What words would you want the listener to walk away with?
I just want them to know that there's no yoke of bondage that you can't come out of. There is no yoke of bondage that you can't come out of. We just have to be willing to take our power back. And for me, how that happened was, listen, I couldn't operate on my own. I had to bring my life under the control of God. Otherwise, every decision I was making was just putting me in one pit, into a deeper pit and another pit.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that life throws your way that you cannot come out of. That is my message. And whatever it is that you're going through, always keep hope. Mm-hmm. Never lose hope. Hope is our greatest weapon. It is such an immense weapon. Never lose hope in what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this.
Thanks for having me.
To be honest, I do not have a takeaway. I don't. I just want to take the whole episode. I don't know what you would choose for yourself, but I'm taking the whole episode. Of course, we have to keep the restoration of hope ongoing, but there's so many other things that happen in this conversation. Next week, for our 100th episode, we're going to have a mini event. Stay here. Oh my God, I hope you have not left yet. Next week, we're going to have a mini event, and I'm going to roll out a link for your registration. So what's going to happen is that you're going to check our social media channels, the different ones. That is, if you're on Telegram, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram might not really show you the link, but I'll share something that will lead you to the link. So check out the form, fill it, and you're going to have yourself a chance to be part of the small gathering. We shall network, we shall have cocktails. Okay, we shall network. Let me not give all the details. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of #WinNavuze21K. If you loved what you heard, make sure you subscribe to #WinNavuze21K in your podcast platform of choice and share it with your friends, family, and anyone that you believe is affected by the millennial world around us. Also, feel free to share your insights about what connected with you on social media and be sure to tag us. We are at #WinNavuze21K on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, our handle is @HTNK Podcast. Catch you next week. Ciao.